My name is Ben Banks. Back on my own today to look at some of the Scottish Premiership transfers that went on throughout the window. A really lengthy transfer window this time around, lasting until October, just with all the goings on in the global health pandemic. I'm going to have a look at sort of the best signings from each Premiership club, some of their outgoings as well, and just an overall look at the goings on around the Premiership. Plenty of deadline day stuff as well. Kyle McGuinness moving to Hibs, all that going on as well. But overall, fairly decent window full of talking points for Scottish Premiership clubs, despite the financial impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we'll look at it all just now. If you haven't already subscribed, please do. Got lots of content coming out on the channel. We've had recently the League Cup previews. There's still, as this goes up tonight, we'll have Wednesday games in the League Cup. Some shocks in the early round and an Athletic in particular shock in Hamilton. We'll look ahead to the Wednesday games as well. So you can catch that before it goes out of date. And as well, we hear from a couple of Premiership managers in that as well. On top of that, we've got Scotland previews and reaction to come up as they prepare to take on Israel in the Euro 2020 playoff semi-finals. A massive game for the country, as well as on Friday we have a Lewis Spence exclusive, former Dundee, Dunfermline and current Scunthorpe midfielder. Right, to look at some of the transfers just now, we'll start in alphabetical order, so we'll go to Pittodrie first with Aberdeen. They made a few signings during the window. Ryan Edmondson, Marley Watkins up front, coming in on loan from Leeds and Bristol City. But for me, the big one for Aberdeen and Derek McInnes is obviously the signing of Ross McCrory from Rangers. They've signed him on a season-long loan, and then at the end of the season, that'll become permanent. A very decent signing from the outset. I think fans of the Pittodrie club were really excited by this one initially, but on his initial performances, he's been brilliant, especially in that midfield role, which looks to be his most comfortable position. He was highly rated at Rangers, perhaps could have got more opportunities there. He spent last season at Portsmouth and as well had a fairly decent season in League One. I think Portsmouth getting to the playoffs and just falling short there, but McCrory has now moved to Aberdeen and he's looked extremely strong in these opening games. He's really tenacious. I've watched him live a few times, and just especially in the game against Hibs at Easter Road, which Aberdeen won 1-0, he completely dominated the midfield. They had the likes of Alex Gogic, Joe Newell in it, and it was very, very impressive. And overall, he's really changed and balanced out that Aberdeen midfield. He's the player perhaps they've been lacking for the last few years now, and now that they've got him, he's really evening out that team. He can also play in at centre-back, which will be interesting to see given Scott McKenna. Probably the big departure from Aberdeen going to Nottingham Forest is the big exit, but whether McCrory now drops back into centre half on occasion remains to be seen. But I think everybody from at least initial viewing can see that in CDM centre mid, that's where Ross McCrory should be. And on deadline day, they brought in Greg Lee, but Ross McCrory definitely on. It could be, I mean, you could argue that he's potentially the best signing of the window, just in terms of what he brings to Aberdeen and what he's doing for Aberdeen. Whilst he perhaps might not be getting the goals as some of the players we're about to mention in this wee list, he definitely, in terms of overall impact, is definitely bringing something different to the table in the North East. Looking as well, next up on our list is Dundee United. Now, they were probably, I think they were the quietest of all the Premiership teams, only bringing in a handful of faces on top of their championship winning squads, as well as a few others going out the exit. Perhaps biggest one for them, keeping Lawrence Shanklin. Plenty of interest in him again after a great first season at Tannadice, and he's managed to keep he's managed to keep a hold of him for at least this season, at least until January anyway, but it looks like he'll be there for the season, which is a big boost for them. Dundee United are probably traditionally a top six club, but for this season they'll be looking to stabilise themselves from their return to the Premiership, and Shanklin will be a big part of that. But for me, although we've not seen him play yet, I think the biggest one for them potentially could be Mark McNulty, their deadline day signing. A really big one from Reading. He'd spent some time on loan at Hibs as well last season. He really looked good in his initial first spell at Hibs, and I think under Paul Heckingbottom in the 2019-20 season. It was very, very decent business from them, getting him on a season-long loan from Reading. He's played a couple of games there, but I don't think he's ever really been in favour there since moving from Coventry City, and he's never really had a full season to display his form, even though he's had two loan spells at Hibs. One was for half a season, then one was only for a couple of months due to the curtailment of the last campaign. But all in all, I mean, if you can get him firing alongside Lawrence Shanklin, that's technically two current Scotland internationals playing up front for Dundee United, alongside the likes of Ian Hart's behind them, who I really like threading passes in. And Luke Bolton as well, and an honourable mention for Luke Bolton coming in on loan from Manchester City. He's looked really impressive. He's probably, in terms of the signings who have made the most impact so far, you could probably argue that it is him. He's looked really, really fast on the wing. Lots of creativity, lots of pace. And Paul McMullen, struggling with injury a wee bit at the start of the season, he filled that gap really well. Given that he's only young, could also have room for improvement. And another interesting one at Dundee United was the signing of Cameroon international, I think it's Giandro Fuchs, who, again, is a pretty decent coup for them. Cameroon international was out in Spain most recently. So Mickey Mellon moving slightly late to bring in perhaps the two trademark, landmark signings of his reign so far at Tannadice. They're coming into these League Cup games off the back of a disappointing 2-1 defeat to Livingston. But the signing of McNulty, especially, if they can get him firing, I think that's one fans will really warm to. Maybe just because they know a bit about McNulty, they know he can score goals given a run of form, and potentially next to Shankland, Nicky Clark in that attacking lineup as well. That could be really good. For the Arabs, Hamilton Accies is probably one of the tougher ones, as already mentioned. Just beaten off Annan Athletic in the League Cup. A lot of fans disgruntled with the tactics. Lots of fans voicing their frustration with Brian Rice. Brian Rice himself labelling the result as embarrassing. I don't think really any of their signings, perhaps maybe one, have really clicked into gear yet. It's been overall a poor start for Accies. I know they've had a couple of good wins. Away to Livingston and away to Mull in particular were traditional Accies results where they just pluck a result from nowhere. But overall, there seems, at least from what I've seen and read, fans just don't seem to be as happy as they once were with under the Brian Rice era. But he has made one really good signing, in my opinion, and Hakeem Adofin, brought in from Livingston. He played right back mostly under Gary Holt, but I don't think that was ever his favourite position at Northampton, where I watched a bit of him due to my family heritage down south. He always looked pretty promising at centre-back, but again was shoehorned into this right-back slot that just never suited him. He's now been moved to Hamilton, where he's been given that centre-back slot. He's playing there week in, week out, and he's been a revelation for them in defence and perhaps most importantly in attack. He scored some really, really important goals for them. Got the point off Dundee United with a header. He got the win off Motherwell with another effort. Scored against Kilmarnock, albeit Hamilton couldn't bring the win over the line in that one. But he's looked really impressive, and he'll be a big part for them this season. They have struggled early on. Perhaps they could have been doing with a striker. I don't think we're now into October and none of their strikers have scored. They probably could be doing with an extra forward, but Brian Rice just not able to bring one in. Free agencies one, Jim Goodwin spoke about that earlier in the week as well. Still lots of players in that, so it'll be interesting to see whether Hamilton do have the budget to move in that market. But overall, Hakeem Adofin, I think, is the one that Hamilton fans will be most pleased with so far. Hibs, they've really went for it in this transfer window. A real sign, a show of intent from Ron Gordon, their chairman, bringing in a host of good names and paying decent money for them given the times we're living in. They're running a leaner squad, but definitely it's quality over quantity at Easter Road this season. They've brought in the likes of Alex Gogic from Hamilton, who's moved to Hibs, and he was one of Hamilton's best player last season. Really solid defensive midfielder. The signing of Kyle McGuinness on deadline day on a 5-year deal, which is a great bit of business. Moved into St Mirren captain Jim Goodwin was desperate to keep him, but Hibs have got him. And that, once he gets back fit from his ACL injury, that could be another stellar bit of business. Jamie Murphy as well, proven Premiership talent. He looked really good in the game against Hamilton. And again, another really solid addition to the squad. Josh Doig as well. No, he's not a new signing, but promoted from the academy. And under the mentorship of Lewis Stevenson at left back, they look to have found a long-term solution there. It's all been really, really positive at Hibs, but I think obviously the one everybody is talking about just now is the signing of Kevin Nisbet. The man has been on fire since his move from Dunfermline. He's got an average of a goal contribution every Premiership game so far this campaign in the ones he's played. It's been a revelation for Jack Ross. He scored 2 again against Hamilton Accies in Hibs' most recent match, winning 3-2 on the night. Much of it down to Nisbet just through his sheer clinical nature up front, and I think it's only a matter of time before Steve Clarke comes calling for him. I mean, you're seeing the likes of Callum Patterson in that squad. Lawrence Shankland in there as well, who, to be fair, has justified his reason with the amount of goals he scored in the Championship over the last couple of seasons, and he started fairly well in the Premiership as well. But Kevin Nisbet's not done too badly against him. He's pretty much been neck and neck with him, and he's definitely started the stronger of the two in the Premiership, albeit Shankland struggled with injury early on with an ankle knock that kept him out the first few games. But Kevin Nisbet has been an absolute revelation. Perhaps again, long-term business from them, 4-year deals. So he plays well there for a couple of years. They've not only got a great striker that looks like he'll score 20 to 25 goals a season for the next 4 years potentially. Chances are he'll get picked off by an English Championship. Who knows? I mean, if he keeps scoring at the rate he is, could he go higher? Remains to be seen. But they won't be worrying about that too much for now. Hibs have managed to secure themselves a couple of big assets in this window, and Kevin Nisbet is definitely the highlight of that. Kilmarnock as well. They've been all right. I mean, so far this season, they started a wee bit slowly, but hit a run of form before then. Positive COVID test trouble there. It'll be interesting to see how they bounce back from that momentum-wise. Their game against Mullow has been postponed until an undeterminable date. Whether they might need to forfeit that remains to be seen, like they did in their League Cup game against Falkirk. The League Cup opener had to forfeit that 3-0 due to COVID tests, not deemed safe enough to play, and Alex Dyer not really wanting to field his youth side in that one for a couple of different reasons. But overall, in the transfer market, they were kept busy. They had a bit of a problem in the goalkeeping department. I think they signed Jake Eastwood from Sheffield United as a loan option for cover. They've got Danny Rogers, who seems to have made themselves number one, but Jake Eastwood, for example, really unfortunate. Played one game on loan for Sheffield United and got himself injured, and Colin Doyle then had to come in. So they've had a wee bit of trouble there, but overall they've been fairly solid this season, steadily bouncing along. And for me, the return of Aaron Tishibola is the key signing for them. He's been underrated sort of midfielder, really, alongside some of the other standout names in the Premiership so far. He's doing a similar job to McCrory, balancing out that midfield, allowing the likes of Gary Dicker and Alan Powers to perhaps sit that wee bit deeper. I mean, they're not getting any younger while still as effective. Legs perhaps haven't got the legs as Tishibola has, and the likes of Chris Burke and Greg Kilty are really thriving as well, because Tishibola is not only doing a job defensively, he's linking defence into attack very well as well. So he's been really, really effective for Kilmarnock so far, and Alex Dyer, no doubt, will be happy with him. I mean, Aston Villa paid $5 million for him a few years ago after really good form at Reading. It's been a tough few years for him, but I think Aaron Tishibola is now starting to show that form that did eventually win him a move to Aston Villa a few years ago. Moving closer to the end of our list, Livingston have been busy as well. The big talking point from them from this window was a couple of reasons in the striker department. Lyndon Dykes was a great one for the club, a real success story there. A club record fee earned from QPR as the now Scotland international moved to Loftus Road, and I mean the replacement saga with Anthony Stokes. He was there 1 minute, gone the next. Departed the club after less than a month at the Tony Macaroni. But overall, they've strengthened. I think, I mean, it's always hard for a club like Livingston. They've got one of the smallest budgets in the Premiership, so they need to sort of pick and choose, but they've been really, really smart in their business. They've not just signed players in the Scottish Premiership, Championship, although they have did that effectively. Signing of Alan Forrest looks like a really good one for them. He's really started positively. They've signed players from all over the shop, including India and Ligue 1, and it's the one from Ligue 1 that really caught my eye so far, Julian Serrano, a great addition. I mean, I don't know how he quite ended up in Livingston. Because he's been involved in the first team at Monaco fairly well. I mean, I think he's got 10 to 20 appearances at Monaco, so he's not been fully out of the picture for a lot of years. He's not so much a breaking through promising prospect. He has broke through, but they've opted to send him to Livingston, which is great for the Lions because he's been a real standout for them. You can tell that technical quality has been really evident. Perhaps just adjusting to the Scottish game a wee bit, but if this is him adjusting to the Scottish game, he could become a real key player for them over the course of the season. He started really well. I think he won their Player of the Month award as well. Technically, really good. I mean, if you've seen the goal he scored against Celtic, that just shows the calibre of player you're talking about with the ball at his feet. Defensively as well, he's looked fairly solid. I mean, Livingston have been well known for their defensive solidity since returning to the Premiership, and he's not looked out of place in that back line alongside new signing Robbie McCrory as well, who has got himself into the Scotland squad due to his form at Livingston, which is a great experience for him on loan from Rangers. But Julian Serrano, for me, is the one that Livingston fans will be most pleased with from this window. Moving to Fir Park with Motherwell, their academy again is producing lots of young talent. David Turnbull moving for, again, a club record fee to Celtic. It was a transfer about 14 months in the waiting after an initial move fell through last summer. He's eventually moved to Parkhead for a big fee after coming back from a knee injury, stronger than ever. In his first 4 or 5 games for Motherwell this season, he looked a real technical cut above the rest, and he's got his rewards for that, and I'm sure everyone associated with Motherwell is wishing him success at Celtic and throughout his future career. In terms of incomings at Motherwell, again, I think they've done okay business. It's been tough for them, obviously, finishing third last season. It can be, for a club as small as Motherwell, who perhaps don't have the budget to sustain themselves up that top end of the park every year, it can be difficult. They've lost a couple of key players as well, David Turnbull, Mark Gillespie, albeit Trevor Carson in goals has replaced the now Newcastle keeper fairly well. They've struggled to get sort of going in front of goal, although that is slowly changing for them now. They have hit some sort of form, although that was brought down to a halt just before the international break that they went on after the game against Kilmarnock was postponed. 5-1 defeat to Rangers in their last game. So again, perhaps a wee bit of a reality check for Robinson's side, but they wouldn't have expected anything from that game, and it'll be one to learn from, I'm sure. But in terms of signings, I quite like the signing of Stephen O'Donnell. He's the one, probably the standout signing for Motherwell so far this summer. I mean, Scotland International, Motherwell sort of had some troubles in both full-back positions. I mean, Motherwell, since the days of Tom Hateley, I've never really had a proper right-back. Richard Tate did play there, who is a right-back, but got shoehorned into left-back for the last couple of seasons as Liam Grimshaw, originally a centre midfielder, got moved into right-back, and that seems to be his position now. Stephen O'Donnell coming in and just completely giving Motherwell a solid right-back. He's perhaps not the flashiest, but as Kilmarnock fans will know, he's a 7 out of 10 every week and gives defensive solidity. Motherwell have been good in defence, although 8 penalties conceded this season, 8 goals from those, and they've only conceded 18 this season. So had a bit of trouble with penalties, but from open play, they've looked decent. Stephen O'Donnell's been a part of that, and he also looks a fairly decent threat going forward as well. He's got a good cross into the box, and that's Motherwell got 3 internationals in their back line as well, if you include Trevor Carson's Northern Ireland goalkeeper. And in and around that setup, Declan Gallagher, the captain's in and about the Scotland setup, and Stephen O'Donnell has been Scotland's starting right back in recent times, although Liam Palmer seems to have moved ahead of him, but still well in with a shout in that setup. Ross County as well have moved to do a couple of bits of business, and they've been fairly good defensively. I think Stuart Kettlewell's side have started the season quite well. Defensively, they really struggled last season, but this season they seem to have evened that out a bit, and I think the reason for that is perhaps one of the defensive signings they make, Alex Iacoviti. He arrived from Forest Green Rovers, I believe, in the summer, and has really, former Scotland under-21 international, and he's really shown why he was at that level at one stage in his career. He's really balanced out that defence, strong in the tackle, good in the air. And for a team that was struggling quite badly in defence last season, they've been doing fairly okay. And I mean, they're mid-table now, which is, given some of the fixtures they've had, I mean, they've already played Rangers, Celtic, Aberdeen, Motherwell, who they got a victory against, Aberdeen as well. So they've played a lot of the top of last season's top 6, and they've managed to still come through all of that in mid-table. So they'll be really pleased with that. And Alex Iacoviti has really impressed me so far. St Johnstone, again, it's a similar situation to Hamilton. Their signings just haven't quite clicked yet. They're really struggling in front of goal just now. They're saying Guy Melhamed on the last day of the transfer window, so it'll be interesting to see whether he can adapt to Scottish football, whether he can get going. But I think the big one for St Johnstone, the one who's clicked so far, is Danny McNamara from Millwall. The right backs look fairly impressive. And I think he was like 3rd choice at Millwall. So if he's 3rd choice at Millwall, Millwall must have some really good right backs, 1st and 2nd choice, because it looks like a really good promising prospect, Danny McNamara. Quite good going forward, and he's fairly decent defensively as well. So St Johnstone fans will be pleased with how he's doing, but overall, I think they'll perhaps just be looking from more from the squad as a whole. Callum Davidson says still perhaps trying to click into gear, try to find what works best for them this season. And finally, final team to look at is St Mirren. They've made defensive signings, Jim Goodwin losing club captain Kel McGuinness in the final days, which wasn't ideal. They moved to bring in Brandon Mason and Daniel Finlayson from Coventry City and Rangers respectively on deadline day, but other deals included some really good defensive additions. Richard Tate, who already mentioned, moved from Mullow to the Saints. Joe Shaughnessy returned to Scottish football, the former St Johnstone captain, signing on a deal, and Marcus Fraser signed a one-year deal as well, the former Ross County captain. But even though that's some really good experience, they've not quite started quite as well as Jack Alnwick in goals, who's, again, you could probably argue, whilst not as flashy as the likes of Kevin Nisbet, you could argue he's been perhaps one of the signings of the window as well. Really great shot stopper, perhaps with a bit of a point to prove in Scottish football. He moved to Rangers, didn't really get regular starts, played in cup competitions and things like that. Went down to Blackpool last year, suffered injury there, and it never really clicked from him then after that. He was playing alongside former St Mirren goalkeeper Mark Howard, and after that injury, Jack Alnwick really did struggle to sort of get regular minutes after playing quite well for Blackpool, but he's came to St Mirren and he's been a revelation for them. They lost Vaclav Hladky, which they could really have struggled to replace, and it looks like they've replaced him just as well. Perhaps Jack Alnwick on par with them at least. Some may argue he's actually performing a bit better, and St Mirren probably couldn't have hoped for a better outcome when they signed Alnwick in the summer, and they'll be delighted with how he is doing, although St Mirren currently fighting out at the bottom again, and they'll be looking for more of his performances to drag them from the bottom of the table. Right, well, I think that's all our teams completed. Another exciting window, and we don't need to wait very long for the next one as well. January, very scarily just over the horizon, only a few months away now as well. So interesting to see how these new signings do over the next couple of months, and clubs will sort of be forced into thinking quickly whether they're happy with their squads come January or whether they want to improve again. Obviously, budgets may come into play in that, just with the COVID-19 pandemic, the return of fans looking less likely by the day, although there are highly mounted petitions and such like to try and get fans, some fans at least, back into stadiums, and hopefully they can go as planned and we can start to see a return to fans and hopefully a return to some revenue streams for clubs. But that's a bit off topic and a debate for another day, a bit off tangent. So we'll leave it there for now. We hope you have enjoyed. Please do remember to subscribe to us. Remember to check out all the content we've got coming out this week. Plenty of it to come from all the Scotland games. Triple header for Steve Clark's side this week, as well as our Lewis Spence exclusive at the end of this week. But until next time, take it easy.